Of ShireTV, I'm James Cleveland.
And I'm Darryl W. Perry. With us in the studio tonight is Yuri Polozov, visiting from Russia. Thanks for joining us, Yuri.
Good evening.
And Yuri, you're a member of the Libertarian Party of Russia. How do you like things here in the United States?
Oh, I'm very excited with what's going on in New Hampshire and with the rise of libertarian movement here.
On Wednesday, March 6, Senator Rand Paul delayed the Senate confirmation of John Brennan as the new head of the CIA. Here are some highlights from the 13-hour filibuster, which essentially was a political show.
President.
The senator from Kentucky.
I rise today to begin to filibuster John Brennan's nomination for the CIA. I will speak until I can no longer speak. I will speak as long as it takes until the alarm is sounded from coast to coast that our Constitution is important, that your rights to trial by jury are precious, that no American should be killed by a drone on American soil without first being charged with a crime, without first being found to be guilty by a court, that Americans could be killed in a cafe in San Francisco, or in a restaurant in Houston, or at their home in Bowling Green, Kentucky, is an abomination. It is something that should not and cannot be tolerated in our country. I don't rise to oppose John Brennan's nomination simply for the person. I rise today for the principle. The principle is one that as Americans we have fought long and hard for, and to give up on that principle, to give up on the Bill of Rights, to give up on the Fifth Amendment protection that says that no person shall be held without due process, that no person shall be held for a capital offense without being indicted. This is a precious American tradition and something we should not give up on easily. They say Lewis Carroll is fiction. Alice never fell down a rabbit hole, and the White Queen's caustic judgments are not really a threat to your security. Or has America the Beautiful become Alice's Wonderland? No, no, said the Queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. Stuff and nonsense, Alice said loudly. The idea of having the sentence first? Hold your tongue, said the Queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice. Release the drones, said the Queen, as she shouted at the top of her voice. Lewis Carroll is fiction, right? When I asked the President, can you kill an American on American soil, it should have been an easy answer. It's an easy question. It should have been a resounding and unequivocal no. The President's response? He hasn't killed anyone yet. We're supposed to be comforted by that. The President says, I haven't killed anyone yet. He goes on to say, and I have no intention of killing Americans, but I might. Is that enough? Are we satisfied by that? Are we so complacent with our rights that we would allow a president to say he might kill Americans, but he will judge the circumstances? He will be the sole arbiter. He will be the sole decider. He will be the executioner-in-chief if he sees fit.
And I would go for another 12 hours to try to break Strom Thurmond's record, but I've discovered that there are some limits to filibustering, and I'm going to have to go take care of one of those in a few minutes here. But I do appreciate the Senate's forbearance in this, and I hope that if there are some on the other side of the aisle who have been listening and feel that they may agree on some of these issues, that they will use their ability to impact the President's decision. And one will say that the Senate should be trying to restrain the executive branch, Republican or Democrat. And two, will use your influence to try to tell the President to do what I think really is in his heart, and that is to say, absolutely we're not going to be killing Americans not in a combat situation, that we will obey the Constitution, that the Fifth Amendment does apply to all Americans, and there aren't exceptions. But I thank you very much for the forbearance, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Illinois.
After the filibuster, Attorney General Eric Holder sent a letter to Rand Paul that reads, "It has come to my attention that you have now asked an additional question. Does the president have the authority to use a weaponized drone to kill an American not engaged in combat on American soil? The answer to that question is no." Rand Paul found this answer to be acceptable. I do not. At first glance, it appears that Eric Holder is saying that a president cannot kill an American on American soil. However, the statement deserves a closer look. The word combat can be both a noun and a verb. When used as a verb, combat is defined as to fight or contend against, oppose vigorously. So, everyone who opposes any aspect of the federal government could be a potential target for a drone attack.
Yeah,
James, what do you think about this?
That's a great point. I mean, who decides the definition of combat? Is there going to be any oversight on these drone strikes that probably are going to happen eventually, but that'd be my guess. I mean, I feel like there's almost no oversight now on the drone strikes that are going on, throughout the world. A lot in Pakistan, but what are your thoughts on that, Daryl?
Well, if President Obama does decide to ever use a drone to kill an American on American soil because he deems that person to be in combat against the U.S., it would not be the first time that the American government has killed people, Americans on American soil, for some form of what is deemed to be rebellion. If we look at the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln did not recognize the secession of the South and went ahead and basically ordered the slaughter of what amounted to upwards of 500,000 Americans on American soil. And he awarded the generals graciously for burning entire cities and towns and villages. And then even more recently, during the Clinton administration, there was the Waco incident and Ruby Ridge, in which Americans were killed without trial because they were deemed to have violated some abstract law. Now, Yuri, you're from Russia, and things are slightly different over there. Has there been any sort of slaughter of Russian citizens by the Russian government in recent years?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's what's going on right now. You're lucky your president is not killing U.S. citizens, but in Russia, it's every other day that we hear news that some terrorist was killed on the Northern Caucasus, and sometimes it's not combatants, sometimes it's women, kids are getting killed. And drones is technology, but here is a question of responsibility. We had a court case when some officer, he killed a Chechen girl during Chechen war, and later he was sentenced. He was saying, "Oh, this is a war, this is what happens, I was just obeying orders." And the problem is you can't bring president to the court. And with drones, it's even more remote. Who will be responsible if some robot will kill somebody? Girls, kids? It's you should make this decision for responsibility and then maybe use this technology.
That's a great point, and fortunately, as Americans, we have not had the experience of having the military used inside the country, and I know in Russia that's occurred.
Well, not since the 70s, when the National Guard opened fire and killed students on the campus of Kent State during an anti-war protest.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, they've gotten around it by, as you know, militarizing the police, and the Bearcat's an example of that. And but I guess your thoughts, Yuri, on what do you think about the military operating within the country?
Oh, it's very painful. Sometimes it happens. Yeah, as I say, it's the matter of responsibility. Sometimes probably military should protect you, sometimes maybe even with drones, but then you should have some decision like Senator Rand Paul said, there should be a first decision by a court, or there should be some way to think afterwards whether it was the right decision to kill somebody.
Thank you, Yuri. The National Taxpayer Union reports that Congressman Donald Payne from New Jersey has introduced a bill that would create a new federal gun buyback program. A buyback program allows governing entities to pay a gun owner for the surrender of his or her firearm. In many instances, buyback programs are not directed at any one type of gun, but instead offer owners compensation for a variety of firearms. H.R. 868 would limit the buyback program to 14 types of guns that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has identified as commonly used in crimes. This includes various semi-automatic pistols, 2 types of revolvers, and 1 kind of shotgun. It does not include funding for buyback of hunting or so-called assault rifles.
If enacted, the Safer Neighborhood Gun Buyback Act would authorize $720 million in new federal spending over a 2-year period. Of the total, at least $576 million would be required to be spent on gun buyback compensation, $72 million on recycling purchased guns, and $72 million on related administrative expenses, and could result in the buyback of up to 735,000 guns.
Though a 2004 National Research Council report states the people most likely to commit crimes are also the people least likely to turn in their weapons, and research has also found that the highest risk weapons are least likely to be traded in at a buyback.
Yeah, my opinion on the buyback thing is a really bad idea for governments to go buy back weapons and take them out of the community. I think it'll lead to a much less safe community. And I encourage people, I don't know if it's legal, but they should attend the buyback and offer people money for their firearms. Like, offer them more money than what they would have got.
Well, that has happened in some places, and I believe activists in the Austin, Texas area have been successful at outbidding the government. And one thing that I think is very interesting, they use the term buy back, which implies that all weapons first belonged to the government and then were somehow given out to the populace. So we're just buying back some of the weapons that actually should be ours, according to government thinking. And something that's interesting in this bill, it would require that all weapons purchased be melted down and turned into street signs.
And Lord knows we have enough street signs, so I think that's a bad idea as well. But I guess it is interesting that they're not targeting assault rifles. I mean, that's a very hot issue at the moment. And you think that they could get a lot of support, especially after the recent school shootings, to buy back those weapons. So it is kind of interesting that they're not.
Yuri, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, I want to say that in Russia we can't own pistols, regular people can't, and we have very high violent crime rate, unfortunately, and this is one of the reasons. So, and this law to buy back some particular kinds of pistols and revolvers, it's funny for me because, as a famous quote says, it's not the gun who kills people, it's people who kills. So if you leave some other kind of guns or knives, there still will be crime. It's not the decision.
Well, thank you for that, Yuri. The New Hampshire House voted 207 to 163 to almost double the New Hampshire gas tax. That's a tax increase of around $1 billion. Yes, billion with a B. HB 617 calls for increasing the gas tax 4 years in a row and also increasing the diesel tax 6 years in a row. HB 617 now goes back to the House Ways and Means Committee for another public hearing on Thursday, March 14th at 1:30 p.m. in Representatives Hall at the New Hampshire State House in Concord. This is your last chance to encourage legislators to reject the almost doubling of the New Hampshire gas tax.
Well, it's the last chance to convince the House to oppose this bill. After it goes through once again, then it goes over to the Senate, and there's a chance that the Senate will either amend this bill or possibly defeat the bill, because some of the funding has been diverted away from road projects to the general fund, which, as we know, the general fund is where politicians love to just put all of the money, and that's why Social Security is broke, is because Social Security's gone from the Social Security fund into the general fund, which goes towards the $1 trillion foreign policy and has led to the current 16, almost $17 trillion national debt. Which, one good thing, New Hampshire doesn't have a massive debt, and I actually don't think that New Hampshire has a state debt at all. I could be wrong on that, but I'm fairly certain that New Hampshire has to have a balanced budget. But increasing the fuel tax is not the proper way to generate revenue, because it's one of those regressive taxes to where the poorer members of society are the ones that get hit the hardest.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I think that's a great point to bring up. Hey, this money isn't just going for the roads. I mean, that's probably what the opponents are going to say, like, you know, let's fix the roads. We need to increase the gas tax. And, you know, I was reading that if this gas tax passes, New Hampshire is going to have one of the higher gas taxes of any of the states. So, I mean, that's a terrible, I think it's a terrible thing. And
this would be a 15-cent tax increase, which would put the fuel tax to roughly 30 cents a gallon. And when one looks at the profit that the oil companies get, they're getting roughly 6 or 7 cents per gallon of profit, but yet the governments are getting somewhere between 15 and 50 cents a gallon profit. So who's the real person that profits when fuel taxes go up and when gas taxes go up?
Yeah, and gas is already very expensive in Keene. I buy my gas in Massachusetts, surprisingly enough, because it's cheaper down there for whatever reason. But, oh well, I guess, do you have any thoughts on this, Yuri?
Oh, I agree with you. In general, the tax burden is bad for people and for economy, but I'm not sure that gas tax is necessarily bad, because what's better than just taxes is hidden taxes. As you said, like debt is a kind of hidden taxation for future generation. So maybe it's good when all people would feel that they are paying taxes and they would pay more attention for this issue.
Thank you. In local news, Keene and many neighboring towns head to the polls tomorrow to vote in school board and town elections. Some towns also have polling for their budget articles and to elect new selectmen. Of the neighboring towns and school districts, only voters in Richmond, Walpole, and the Monadnock School District have the option of voting on a smaller budget. The proposed town budgets in Richmond and Walpole are both less than 1% smaller than the current budget. The proposed budget for the Monadnock School District is 0.3% smaller than the current budget, and this is likely the result of Sullivan's removal from the district in June.
And in Keene, voters had the horrible choice of choosing between a budget that will increase local property school taxes by 5% or by 10%. Voters will also elect 3 school board members for 3-year terms. 8 people are running. Of the 8, 3, Ian Freeman, Conan Saladay, and Darrell W. Perry, who are the only candidates opposed to the budget increase, promise, if elected, to bring fresh ideas to the board and will work to reduce or eliminate the initiation of force that is inherent in the current state-controlled monopoly system of education.
Another city with a monstrous school budget and nothing to show for it is New York City. In a recent article, Russia Today reports that 80% of New York City high school graduates require remedial training upon entering community college. These remedial classes include training in both basic reading, writing, and math, training they should have received in high school. And how do supporters of this broken school system respond? By throwing more money at the problem. a solution that only inflates the issue by creating higher tuition costs while not actually fixing the problem. These days, college graduates are finding it increasingly difficult to find decent paying jobs in order to pay off massive student loans. Here's video highlighting the unintended consequences of government meddling in our schools.
Now, it's a tight jobs market in the United States, especially for newcomers trying to find their way in. With half of last year's graduates still unemployed, the class of 2011 also appears to be facing a grim future. And with the heavy burden of thousands of dollars of student loans and no jobs to pay them off with, they're entering a vicious circle. Marina Portnaya has this story.
America is home to the world's most expensive and prestigious universities. Yet paying for them has created a nation where the majority sign on to lifetime payments of loans.
I'll probably have like $60,000 student debt.
Over like 90,000, easy. Yeah.
Does that make you nervous?
Yes, that makes me terrified.
Every American graduate is launching into a dwindling job market, saddled with at least $24,000 in student debt.
Either I'm going to land a great job or start a great company, or I'm going to be seriously in the hole.
According to the Economic Policy Institute, the U.S. economy currently has one job for every 5 applicants. Meanwhile, business for bankruptcy attorney Gennady Litvin is surging. Half of his clients are unemployed degree holders, drowning in debt.
Anyone going to college essentially is gambling. Once again, from an investor's point of view, right now, the way the dollar is, the way inflation is going up, and the way the job market is, a college education just isn't a good investment and not a good return on your money.
Even economics professors on the inside, like Richard Wolff, say enslaving students to banks is a disaster for America's economic viability.
The future of any country in the world economy these days depends first and foremost on the quality and the quantity of skilled, trained, new young workers. And the major institutions that produce that are the colleges and universities. You're pricing them out of being able to do that.
Today, a diploma no longer serves as a guaranteed passport to prosperity for Americans. In the meantime, the number of foreigners studying at U.S. colleges and universities has reached record highs. According to the latest statistics, nearly 700,000 international students have flown in from all over the world to study in America. And the majority are transplanting from America's economic competitor. According to the Institute of International Education, Chinese students studying in the States surged 30% in 2009. Most foreign families reportedly bypass financial aid and pay full tuition. Since 1978, the cost of U.S. colleges and universities has reportedly increased more than 900%, while household income rose just 150%.
What you're seeing is American universities, particularly at the elite, are happier to have foreigners who tend to pay their own way because they come from the very tops of those societies, and they will forego the Americans who can't afford it much anyway.
According to the Pew Research Center, 57% of Americans say college is not worth the price. But with a widening workforce of untrained and uneducated, many wonder what the U.S. economy will eventually be worth. Marina Portnaya, RT, New York.
And you know, watching that story, I'm reminded of the joke of, you're in a bar and you say, who here has a college degree? And then you say, get me another drink. Because, I mean, like, the reality is, there are not good jobs anymore. And I thought the news piece there did a great point on stressing that it is a gamble. You're gambling, it's an investment, but it may not pay off,
Well, there was an article from Lou Rockwell a couple of years ago that said that education is the next bubble. Because there was the housing bubble, and before that there was the .com bubble, and before that there was another bubble. There's always some sort of bubble to where money is being artificially put into one segment of the economy, causing the prices to go up to where it's basically unaffordable. And then the bubble burst, and everybody that invested money into whatever it was before that bubble burst is now way over their heads And with the mortgage, they're calling it upside down or underwater. And I would say that that's even more accurate when describing education, because you've got people that are graduating with, upwards of $100,000 in debt. And what jobs are they finding? They're finding low skill, low wage jobs.
Yeah, and it's important too to realize that student loans are not forgiven in bankruptcy. What are your thoughts on college, Yuri?
I agree. Education is a bubble, and it's difficult to find job, especially if you don't have experience. And I think, on the other hand, you are lucky because you may influence it on a local level. So take your time, learn who is running for school board, and come to vote tomorrow. Don't vote for Daryl Perry just because he is a handsome TV star. Vote because his program, because he is going to stop this tax race and this inefficient system.
Thank you, Yuri. That's it for this week's episode of ShireTV. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you would like to get in contact with us, maybe there's a story you'd like us to cover, or perhaps you would like to make a guest appearance on the show yourself, you can drop us an email at news@shiretv.org. Thank you, Yuri, for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy your time here in the United States.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Tune in for next week for another episode of ShireTV. For more news and analysis, I'm James Cleveland.
And I'm Daryl W. Perry. May you each find happiness, peace, and prosperity.